Here's a strange truth that few dare to face. The people who love the deepest, who give their all, who stretch themselves to heal others, are often the ones who end up trapped in the most toxic relationships. Why is that? Is kindness a weakness? Or is it their overwhelming empathy that makes them more vulnerable? In this video, you won't just find answers, you may find yourself. This is a quiet message for the hearts that have been manipulated but kept loving anyway. A light for those who are exhausted from always putting others first. If you've ever felt like you were slowly drowning in an undefined, confusing relationship, if you've ever asked yourself, is this all my fault? Then don't take your eyes off this video. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a second, because by the end, we'll uncover what makes a super empath reclaim full ownership of their life. Part 1, they see, truly see. It's no coincidence that those who love the most often get pulled into the deepest wounds. When you carry a sensitive, open heart, you don't just notice pain, you feel called to heal it. And that instinct, while beautiful, can turn you into the perfect emotional supply for someone who has no intention of healing themselves. Among such people, one stands out as particularly dangerous: the narcissist. Not the caricature who's obsessed with selfies or attention, but the one who needs others not for connection, but to uphold the illusion of their own identity. They don't arrive as manipulators. They arrive with charm, intensity, and attention that makes you feel chosen. They know how to make you feel special. But behind that magnetic mask lies a fragile ego that constantly feeds on validation, empathy, and emotional energy just to survive. And who are the easiest to pull into that orbit? The empaths. The ones who see beauty in brokenness. The ones who keep trying to find the good even when it's hurting them. The first step toward freedom is awareness. The super empath no longer gets caught up in the glittering surface, the tragic backstories, or the emotional theatrics. They begin to see, not just with their eyes, but with the heart sharpened by experience. What once moved them now reveals itself as manipulation, and once truth is named, illusion starts to fall apart. Because you can't control someone who has awakened. This moment doesn't arrive with lightning or drama. It usually comes quietly, after too many sleepless nights wondering, why do I always feel drained after talking to them? That's when a flicker of light cuts through the fog of gaslighting and emotional confusion. Not because someone pointed it out, but because they start trusting their own intuition, the very instinct they were taught to doubt. Narcissists are masters of reality distortion. They convince you that your feelings are the problem, that you're too sensitive, that your memory is faulty, that you must love them unconditionally, even when the conditions are ongoing harm. But one day, the empath stops asking, what did I do wrong? And starts asking, why does this keep happening? And then the pieces start to click. They realize their love hasn't healed anything, only depleted them. That tenderness is met not with kindness, but with demand, with entitlement, with control. They begin to name what once felt unnameable: manipulation, emotional exhaustion, gaslighting. The C is the first step, but it is the pivotal one, because once the light of awareness is lit, it can't be extinguished. The empath who once walked in confusion and guilt now begins to rise, eyes wide open, heart finally alert. No longer the blind healer, now a conscious observer who finally understands the truth never harmed them, only the lies ever did. 2, they set clear boundaries. Once the super empath sees the relationship for what it truly is, they are no longer willing to let their emotional space be trespassed unconsciously. They come to understand that love does not mean giving others unrestricted access to their soul. Where they once feared being seen as selfish, they now learn a liberating truth. Setting boundaries is not a rejection of love. It is an act of self-respect. For many empaths, saying no once felt unbearable. It meant sleepless nights, guilt, and anxiety. They confused refusal with hurting others. But after enduring unreasonable expectations and feeling emotionally exploited, they finally grasped the reality. Without boundaries, there is no self. When a super empath begins to set boundaries, it's not dramatic. They don't yell, blame, or lash out. They simply stop offering themselves up to be drained. They might delay replying to guilt-laden messages. They decline requests that exhaust them. They step back from conversations that revolve entirely around the other person. And they stop being swept into the emotional storms the narcissist creates to keep them off balance. To the narcissist, this feels like rebellion, because boundaries don't just block access, they threaten control. When the empath finally says enough, the narcissist senses the shift. They may retaliate with anger, blame, or victim playing, but the super empath is no longer easily swayed. What makes these boundaries powerful is that they don't stem from anger. They come from clarity, from love for oneself. And something magical happens. The more boundaries the empath sets, the more they return to themselves. They stop feeling guilty for not pleasing everyone. They no longer apologize for reclaiming their energy and time. For the super empath, boundaries aren't walls. They are circles of protection. They don't make them colder, they make them safer. And in that safety, love becomes free again, no longer tethered to manipulation or control. 3, they practice emotional neutrality. One of the most powerful ways a super empath disarms a narcissist isn't with shouting or accusations. It's by simply not reacting. It sounds simple, but for someone deeply attuned to others' emotions, practicing emotional neutrality is both an art and a journey. Empaths are used to emotional syncing. When the other is happy, they feel joy. When the other is hurting, they ache too. When there's anger, they look inward for fault. But once awakened, they realize not every emotion is a call for rescue. Narcissists don't just manipulate with words. They manipulate with feelings. They know exactly how to provoke a calculated silence, a passive-aggressive remark, or an outburst when you don't comply. Every reaction from you, defending, explaining, apologizing, feeds their sense of power. The more you respond, the more they control the narrative. But then the super empath stops. They shift from reaction to observation. A blame-filled comment, they don't justify. An angry outburst, they stay calm. Another play for sympathy, they no longer rush to fix it. They begin to create space between trigger and response. And in that space, they reclaim their power. This is an emotional detachment. Quite the opposite. It's conscious presence. They still feel, still love, still care, but they refuse to be consumed. They choose to keep their peace rather than hand it over like emotional currency. They understand that calm is not indifference. It is mastery of the heart in a chaotic world. To the narcissist, this is terrifying because when they can no longer provoke a response, they feel invisible. And to an ego built entirely on being the emotional center of others, invisibility is unbearable. That's the moment the spiral begins to slow. The chaos loses its grip. And the super empath, when overwhelmed by other storms, starts walking steady. Their life is no longer dictated by someone else's emotional weather. 4, they prioritize themselves. After seeing the truth of the relationship, after setting firm boundaries and learning to remain emotionally grounded, a deep transformation begins to unfold within the super empath. They return to themselves. Throughout the time they were trapped in a toxic relationship, the empath often lived on the sidelines of their own life. Every concern, every decision, even the rhythm of their emotions revolved around the moods and needs of the narcissist. Their thoughts were consumed with questions like, how can I not upset them? Or what more can I do to fix this? All while neglecting the most important question, what about me? When the super empath awakens, they begin to feel the growing emptiness within them, a space that used to be filled with constant efforts to please someone else. That space now becomes an invitation to come home. They start listening again to the quiet joys, the forgotten desires, the parts of themselves they abandoned just to avoid being too much. Prioritizing themselves doesn't mean becoming selfish. For the super empath, it is an act of mature self-love. They begin to carve out space to rest without needing to earn it, space to say, I'm tired today, and that's okay, space to live for themselves, not through someone else. The narcissist cannot tolerate this shift. They feel it. The moment the emotional supply begins to dry up, they'll try to pull the empath back with guilt, with promises, with well-practiced remorse, but the super empath no longer falls for it. They've tasted freedom, and nothing toxic is worth trading it away. They learn to step out of unnecessary conversations. They return to the small things that nourish them. A quiet morning, a page of a good book, a warm cup of tea, or a friend who listens without demanding. And they realize love doesn't have to feel like chaos to be real. The most beautiful part? When they begin to truly love themselves, they no longer need to be chosen by anyone else. They choose themselves. Something they never realized they had the right to do before. 5, they speak the truth. After everything, the clarity, the boundaries, the calm, the return to self, the super empath reaches the final and most liberating step, the truth. No more avoidance, no more pretending that maybe things will get better. They look directly at the reality and they name it. Not in anger, not to hurt, but with a calm that only comes from no longer being afraid. They say, I see what's happening here. I no longer want to engage in this dynamic. I used to doubt myself, but now I trust what I feel. The truth doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't require tears or confrontation, because truth, when spoken at the right moment, breaks illusions effortlessly. The narcissist, who lives in a world built on deception, manipulation, and denial, sees truth not as discomfort, but as a threat to their very existence. Truth exposes what they fear most, that they are not who they pretend to be, that they no longer have power over you, that their mask has been not only seen through, but stripped away by your quiet clarity. The super empath doesn't speak truth to get an apology. They're not waiting for acknowledgement. They speak it to liberate themselves. Because once truth is spoken, it cannot be undone. It spreads like light entering a dark room. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. And the most profound part, they're not just speaking to the narcissist, they're speaking to themselves. Affirming, I see now, I understand, I have moved through this. And from that moment on, they are free. Not because the narcissist changed, but because they no longer live under the shadow of the past narrative. Truth marks the end of false power and the beginning of authenticity, consciousness, and real freedom. It is the moment the super empath stops being a victim and becomes the one who leads, not to dominate others, but to finally own their story. The journey of a super empath is not an easy road. It is filled with challenges, pain, and moments that make you question the very value of the kindness you carry. But if you've walked through the dark valleys of manipulation, of feeling like you are never enough, then you are not weak. You are someone in the process of rising. Because a super empath is not a victim forever. When they begin to see clearly, to set boundaries, to remain emotionally grounded, to prioritize their own needs, and to bravely name what is really happening, they don't just break free from a person, they break free from an entire way of living, where love always meant sacrifice and kindness was mistaken for weakness. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to try harder to be loved the right way. Because real love doesn't leave you empty. It brings you back home, to yourself. If you're on that journey, the path of healing and rebirth after a toxic relationship, know this, you are not alone. What you're feeling is real, and yes, you can break free, not through revenge, but through awareness, through deep self-respect. If this video has resonated with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because we're walking this healing journey together, step by step, toward clarity, peace, and a life built from the inside out. And if today's message spoke to your heart, don't hesitate to share this video with someone who might need to hear it right now, in this very moment. And remember this, you weren't born to be controlled. You were born to be free, to love, and to live fully, fearlessly, and unapologetically in the truth of your own story.